Good afternoon. We come together today to mourn the loss of Maxine Mickey Rubenstein, devoted wife of 70 years to Stanley, sister to Carl Bubba Friedman and Elaine Royal Zichronam Livracha, mother to Forrest, Michael, and Sam, grandmother to Melinda, Aaliyah, Daniel, Emily, Anna, Simon, Sydney, and Max. Great-grandmother to Hudson and Sloan. And of course, a virtual aunt or friend to many of us here today. We come together today to share our grief and sadness at her death and to support Mickey's family and each other during this time of darkness. God, we pray to you today that her family might find comfort in those that are present, and you provide them with the strength to honor Mickey's memory. Blessed are you, Adonai, who comforts those in mourning and enables us to provide comfort. And let us say, Amen. In the words of the book of Kohelet of Ecclesiastes, the season is set for everything, a time for every experience under heaven. Time for dancing and a time for wailing. Time for birthing and a time for dying. Time for speaking and a time for silence. Time for seeking and a time for losing. This time of mourning can be a complicated time, filled with many emotions and memories, both bitter and sweet. We'll begin our service with the recitation of psalms and prayers, thus linking Mickey's life with the 3,000-year-old tradition of the people Israel and the eternity of God. Begin with the words of Psalm 15, Mizmor LeDavid, a Psalm of David. Adonai mi yagur ba'ohalecha ki yishkon bahar kodshecha. Holech tamim ufoel tzedek v'dover emet bilvavo. Lo ragal al lishono lo asad re'ehu ra'a v'cherpa lo nasa al krovo. Nivze be'inav nimas v'et yerei Adonai yichabed nishpa lahara v'lo yamir. Kaspo lo natan b'neshech v'shochar al naki lo lekach u'se'ele lo yimot le'olam. Do we deserve to enter God's sanctuary? Can we merit a place in the presence of God? Live with integrity, do what is right, speak the truth without deceit. Have no slander upon your tongue, do no evil to others, do not mistreat your neighbor. Spurn a contemptible person, but honor those who revere Adonai. Never retract a promise once made, though it may bring you harm. Lend no money at unfair rates, accept no bribe against the innocent. Make these deeds your own, then shall you stand firm forever. In the words of Psalm 34, L'chu vanim shimu li yerat Adonai alam dechem. Mi ha'ish hachafetz chaim ohev yamim lirot tov. Netzor leshoncha meira usfatecha midaber mirma. Sur meira v'aseh tov b'kesh shalom v'rod fehu. Come, my children, and listen carefully. You will learn what it means to fear Adonai. Who is eager for life? Who desires years of good fortune? Guard your tongue from evil, your lips from deceitful speech. Shun evil and do good. Seek amity and pursue it. And in the Talmud, it teaches that the ark that the Ten Commandments were in were covered on the inside and the outside with gold. Amar Rabba, Kol Tamid Chacham she'en tochu kavaro, enu Talmid Chacham. We can understand why the ark might be covered with gold on the outside. Decorations should be seen. What need, however, was there for gold on the inside of the ark? Rabbah teaches that the answer is that one's inside should be identical to their outside. Tohu kavaro. And such is the case with goodness. Its open expression must be matched by an inner conviction. And every Friday night in traditional households, it is customary for the husband to bless his wife with the words of Proverbs 31, which we'll do an excerpt from today. Eshed chayil mi yimtza, rachok mi pninim michra. Patach ba lev bala, shala lo yechsar. Gmalatu tov varora, kol yemei chayeha. Kapab harsa la'uni, v'yadea shilcha la'evyon. Oz v'hadar levusha, tizchak liyom acharon. Pia porcha b'chochma, v'torar chesed ala leshona. Sophia halichot beita, v'lechem atzlut lo tochel. Kamu v'neha v'yashrua, bala v'yalala. Rabot banot asu chayel, v'atalit al kulana. Sheker achen v'hevel hayofi, Isa yerat anai hiti talal, tenula mi pri yadeha, v'yalalua v'sharim maaseha. What a precious find is an Eshet Chayil, a woman of valor. Her worth is far beyond rubies. Her husband puts his confidence in her and lacks no good thing. She is good to him, never bad, all the days of her life. She opens her hand to the needy and extends her hand to the poor. She is clothed with strength and splendor. She looks to the future cheerfully. She opens her mouth with wisdom. Her tongue is guided by kindness. She oversees the activities of her household and never eats the bread of idleness. Her children come forward and bless her. Her husband praises her and says, "Many women have done superbly, but you surpass them all." Charm is deceitful and beauty vain, but a God-revering woman is much to be praised. Extol her for the fruit of her hand. Wherever people gather, her deeds speak her praise. And continue with the words of Psalm 23. Mizmor LeDavid, the Psalm of David. Adonai roi lo echsar. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. Binot deshe yarabitzeni, giving me repose in green meadows. Almei menuchot yinahaleni, nafshi yeshovev, leading me beside the still waters to revive my spirit. Yancheni b'maglei tzedek lema'an shemo, guiding me on the right path, for that is God's essence. Gam ki elech b'geit al mavet, though I walk through a valley of the shadow of death, lo irara ki ata imadi, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Shivtecha mishantecha hema yinachamuni, your staff and your rod comfort me. Taroch lefanai shurchan neged tzorarai, you prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. Tishanta v'shemen roshi kosi ravaya, you anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Ach tov v'chesed yirtafuni kol yemei chayai, surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life. V'shavti b'veit Adonai v'orech yamim, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai forever. This time we want to take a moment, some time here to share some stories and some memories and some lessons that we have from Mickey's life. As we'll begin by inviting Mickey's grandchildren to come up first to share a few words in her honor.
Today I've been thinking, going over in my head, what in the world I could talk about. There is not enough time in the world to talk about my grandmother. She was a great woman, clearly had many friends, family. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for being here, but one thing that stuck out to me that was rolling over in my mind for a while was every summer a lot of the family meets together in Destin, Florida for a week-long trip. And something we've been doing in prior years was we would have a girls' day that included us all going out for pizza and getting our nails done and just gossiping, talking about life, catching up with each other. I've always thought that family comes first above all, above especially items, places, things, other people. Everyone here today is family, but this was the first year in a while that we weren't able to do our Girls' Day tradition because my grandmother and grandfather were not in Destin this year. So later this summer, I decided to go out with my mom and get my nails painted, and it reminded me of that girls' trip that we always go on. And I know from now on, whenever I go out to get my nails done, have pizza, spend any time with the people I love, I know my grandmother will be watching us, and even though she's not physically here, I promise to keep her memory alive, and I know she's here as well. Thank you.
All right. I'm Melinda. As Mimi's oldest and self-proclaimed favorite grandchild, I wanted to speak about a side of her that most did not know. To her friends, family, and the community, she was thoughtful, kind, charitable, one might say the perfect Southern woman. The woman that I knew was all of those things, but bubbling underneath the surface was a woman that questioned and sometimes pushed back against Southern traditions and philosophy. Most of Mimi's friends and contemporaries chose to get married and raise their children, tend to the house in lieu of pursuing outside employment. Mimi worked with Stanley, or Tally as we affectionately call him, and while he pursued dental school and enlisted in the Army. Once she had her 3 boys, she would blend working in Tally's dental practice and raising their 3 boys. I once asked her why she worked outside the home for 0 money, no less, when so many of her friends did not. And she told me that she would not want to be a woman that did not know how to budget, was clueless about balancing a checkbook, or even worse, how to write a check. One of my favorite stories is when Mimi and Tally went to buy a car and the car salesman continued to address Tally. She told the salesman that he would work with and address her or else they would be leaving. Begrudgingly, the salesman didn't want to lose the sale, so he acquiesced, and Mimi wrote the check from her own account for her new car. As soon as they pulled out the lot, Mimi turned to Tally and said, "Let's hightail it to the bank. I have no money in my account." Mimi got married on her 18th birthday to the love of her life. I often questioned why she would want to get married so young, and even crazier, share her birthday with her wedding anniversary, as it would mean she would have one less celebration. Honestly, there were 364 other days she could have chosen. She didn't have a straight answer for that, other than why wait if she wanted to marry Tally. But she decided that she would always tell me that I should wait until I had my education before getting married. I mostly heeded her advice, and I met my husband Scott in law school. And for almost the first year, she affectionately called him law school boy. As I told her that mid-20-year-olds did not rush to put labels on relationships, and she couldn't call him my boyfriend. I would often ask her relationship advice, knowing that she had married at such a young age and lived in a totally different time than me. and I was an independent woman that eschewed traditional Southern values. So she would have to step outside her comfort zone to provide such advice. When I was thinking of moving in with Scott after law school, I gently brought up the idea with Mimi, knowing she might be horrified. But I was met with a welcoming discussion. She voiced her thoughts that moving in with a partner before marriage might delay marriage, but said, perhaps it could be good so you can decide if you actually like living with him. She ended the discussion with, it wouldn't be my choice, doesn't make it right, and doesn't make it wrong. So I took that to mean I had her blessing. She was right on both accounts, but we eventually did get engaged. She was so excited, she asked if there was any way that she could help. To her utter dismay, I said that there was only one very simple thing that she could do. She could bring 300 petit fours from Edgar's Bakery up to New York. She called the airlines at least 45 times to confirm that there would be overhead space for all 300. She continued to bring that up lovingly and jokingly until we had our son, Hudson, and then I was eventually almost forgiven.
Okay, so recently, my grandma, Mimi, she butt dialed me one day while I was at school. And I was in the middle of a JSU, Jewish Student Union meeting. And she had butt dialed me. I picked up. I told my teacher, I said, hey, my grandma's calling. Can I go take this? I didn't know what she was going to say. And my teacher was like, yeah, of course. So I go in the hallway, and I'm like, hey, Mimi, what's up? Is everything okay? And she's like, yeah, I didn't mean to call. I meant to call my other granddaughter, Aaliyah, but I guess, I guess Siri had other plans. So I was like, oh, thank you for calling. I'm actually at school right now. I'm in the middle of a JSU, Jewish Student Union meeting, and she was like, I don't even know, she was so sorry. She was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I interrupted a Jewish student union meeting. And I was like, no, Mimi, it's okay, I promise. And she was like, no, I'm so sorry, I would love to talk, but this is so important for you. And I thought it was really funny because, like, that's so Mimi. And so I was like, okay, yeah, and I called her at the end of class, and I was like, hey, like, I can talk for a couple minutes. I have 10 minutes till my next class. So we sat and talked, and that might have been one of the last times I talked to her, which is pretty sad thinking about it now. But she also recently kind of learned how to use social media. For me, I've been posting like silly little videos online, and she had been following me, which I thought was really sweet because I know she had no clue how to use social media. I know she had no clue how to open the Instagram app and like scroll through and find my account. But she would call me and she would tell me that she'd been watching my new videos. And that was really sweet. I know, like, that's probably not the most interesting thing you could be doing, but she would always be like, your videos are amazing. And even today, I had people come up to me that I'm not super close with, but they'd be like, oh, Mimi would tell me about your videos, and she showed me a bunch of your videos. And I had posted on Instagram that my grandmother had passed away, and so many people were commenting, you know, like, we're so sorry. But my Uncle Forrest commented and said that when they were in the waiting room for her surgery, they were watching my videos. And I thought that was really sweet because she was a really good person and she was a really good grandma, and I know she was proud of all of us. And we'll continue to make her proud.
So when I think of my relationship with Mimi, the first thing I think of is that our shared love of Alabama football. So for the last 6 or 7 years, every Saturday morning, I would get a text saying who Alabama plays, what time it is my time in Maryland, not in Alabama, a little fun fact about the game, and then love Mimi or love Mimi and Tally, as if I didn't have their contact for 10 years, always signing off. And then one of my favorite memories of Mimi is when Alabama was in the national championship against Georgia, and they had the crazy comeback, and it was midnight my time, and it was late when they would normally be asleep, but right when the game ended, instead of going to bed or anything, Mimi called me so she could share the memory with me instead of sharing it with herself, and that just is the first kind of person that Mimi is. Yeah. Roll Tide.
It's only a first. At this time, I'd like to invite up Terry Hyman to share a few words, who has been working with Mickey with the Chevra Kadisha for how many years now?
Since I've been back to Birmingham, 10, 12.
For 10, 12
but
years.
especially the last 5.
So we'll invite her to share a few
Thank
words.
you. Thank you all for coming. There's a Jewish proverb. Actually, let's make it a local Jewish proverb. God couldn't be everywhere, so he created Aunt Mickey. Well, maybe I changed it a little, but I think we can all agree this speaks to the qualities and traits of our beloved Mickey. She had no enemies. She helped everyone. An icon. Don't know an answer? Call Aunt Mickey. Don't know how to write a letter? Call Aunt Mickey. Don't know what to wear? Call Aunt Mickey. Don't know what? Well, you get the picture. She helped everyone and was so humble about it. Many of you know my mother, Virginia Hyman, and how close they were for many, many years. They met in a bathroom in Memphis, Tennessee on New Year's Eve, 1953, crying. Aunt Mickey had just gotten married. My mother had just left her 2-week-old baby with her parents to be at this New Year's Eve party. And Aunt Rose was there too, crying. I can't quite remember why Aunt Rose was crying, but I think she had just gotten married too. As they often joke, she got married on the longest night of the year, which would have been the solstice. They were so young, they had no idea what was ahead of them, but those tears bounded them together and brought them to Birmingham. Mom and Aunt Mickey were always together, helping and serving, and many times mistaken for sisters. They were soul sisters at the temple and in life. As Mom struggled through the end of her life, I often depended on Aunt Mickey for help in what to do. And after my mom passed, Aunt Mickey still remained right by me, adopting me, as I would say, as many do feel that too, always including me in with her family. And now, honoring me with the task of the Heva Kadisha, even these last few weeks, sitting up in the hospital, I'd be there with her, I'd have my laptop, and we were creating the emails and calling on the phone and talking right to the very end, helping us reorganize. That was Aunt Mickey. Hard shoes to fill, both my mom and Aunt Mickey's, but Lador Vador, I will carry it on. Honestly, though, Aunt Mickey became a best friend to me, and maybe I to her, for we often talked about how hard it was for her, seeing all her dear friends depart. She wasn't afraid to talk about it, though, and how her Friday night dinners dwindled before inviting someone else to light the candles and bless the wine. Mark and Aaliyah, Lolly on the phone, and many others, I'm sure. Precious times to hold on to. I imagine I speak for many. She will be truly missed, but the thing is, when we lose someone we love, we must learn not to live without them, but to live with the love they left behind. Thank you.
Now I'd like to invite up Mickey's nephew, Stuart Royal.
So I am Stuart Royal, and I was asked to say a few words on behalf of my siblings and my first cousins being Mark, Tracy, and Lolly Friedman, and my siblings being Marty, Joycey, my twin brother Ed. Where are you, Ed? Their partner in crime there. And our sister Robin, who tragically can't be here today with us. If you know them, you'll know that my first cousins and we love to talk a lot. So attempting this is a bit of a challenge. So I asked my sibs and cousins to send me some words and stories to include, and I will selectively do that knowing that this is only the tip of the iceberg. I would start with telling you that our family is filled with successful doctors, lawyers, businessmen, valedictorians, but Maxine Joy Friedman Rubenstein did not need any extra degrees. She was plenty wise without them. Her superpower was always to listen quietly and work on behalf of others behind the scenes, and to call people to make things happen, The Friedmans call when they want things to happen. Mickey just made the world a better place by giving her time to organizations and doing it with love, affection, and a tilt of the head and a little smile. A newcomer at Temple Bethel always had a special greeting from Mickey. Every one of us, nieces and nephews, thought that Mickey thought we were her favorite. And she made all of you here, honoring her, feel the same way too. Our grandmother, Mimi Friedman, gave birth to the youngest Mickey Joy Friedman, coming along 11 years after her older brother, Bubba Carl, and her 14 years, her sister, my mother, Elaine. Marty, our oldest sister, was only 7 years younger than Mickey. She always considered Mickey her sister, getting boy advice, watching her put on makeup, telling stories together. She remembered Mickey was the sweetheart of AZA. That was a big deal. Marty considered her a queen. Marty, who lives in Houston with her husband, Melvin, came and visited Mickey twice here very recently, which meant the world both to Mickey and to Marty. Tracy remembers that when she was planning her wedding, she wanted Melinda, who you've seen today already, to be her flower girl. She asked, and the answer was yes, and that meant that Mickey had to do all the background work to make it happen. Tracy's mom was dismayed that Tracy put that burden on Mickey, but Tracy was clueless that it was a burden. She was just putting her ducks in a row, creating her dream ceremony, and had it. Mickey never let on that it was a bit of a burden, and she delivered Melinda beautifully outfitted with a perfect hairdo. Most importantly to Tracy, Mickey understood that she needed what she needed after her mom and dad were gone, and she wholeheartedly filled the role of loving parent, adopting Mark, Lolly, Gary, and Sam at the beach into her already large Rubenstein family, and just had meals and hanging out together. And she insisted that she stay with her when she came to visit her Birmingham girlfriends, because that ensured that they would be able to spend time together. Tracy was lucky to be able to study Judaism with Mickey in person at Elena Cantor's retreats, and then online from Arizona during COVID. Mickey had fresh insights, not the easily obvious ones, and her approach was always loving. And the same was true for Rabbi Hinken's Thursday Beit Midrash, which she attended. Niece Lolly says, Mickey had the warmest smile and hugs and was thoughtful in everything she did, a purveyor of wise counsel, owner and spreader of more loving kindness than anyone I've ever known, a menschette times infinity. She also remembers Gary, Tracy's husband, coaxing Mickey into saying her one and only curse word, which I will not repeat. Mark Friedman was a staple Shabbat dinner attendee at the Rubenstein's house, and he brought his usual humor and entertaining self always. And it was a mitzvah to Mickey that he did such a wonderful job taking care of her older brother, Uncle Bubba, when he was ill. My twin brother, Ed, partner in crime, remembered countless vignettes from working Saturdays at King Credit, where Mickey worked in the office. He referred to her jokingly as old bag. She was an old bag. And he said, "That's Aunt Old Bag, AOB, Aunt Old Bag." From then on, Mickey called him NOB, Nephew Old Bag. Can't get the best of Mickey. Mickey and her sister Lainey spoke to each other every morning before the rest of the house woke up and solved the world's problems and family problems at that time. Not that there were any, because the Friedmans were optimistic problem solvers who wore rose-colored glasses. One of Mickey's joys was to feed us. Niece Joycey remembers her homemade holiday food, especially her kreplach and chopped liver, and all of us loved her charosis. Making kreplach with all the Birmingham family at her house was her yearly heavenly treat to us. Her brisket was a hit at our yearly Miramar Beach family reunions. Just ask her grandkids, especially Eden Royal. With the passing of Elaine and Bubba, Mickey was the go-to counselor for the family on all issues of ethics, kindness, virtue, and protocol. If you had a problem, call Mickey. She was calm and reflective and modestly giving of her advice. One final anecdote, which I will entitle, "Who You Gonna Call?" When my twin brother and I were 13, our parents went off on a trip to Israel and placed us in the care of Mickey, who was all of 28 years old at the time. Ed and I had been convinced that the brand new Camp Ramah in New York would be a perfect fit. Lots of new sports fields, new friends, etc. So off we went in the back seat of the rabbi's car, driving with his daughter, to Camp Ramah in the Berkshires. Well, it didn't take more than 3 days for Ed and I to realize that this camp, with no hoops on the basketball court, no way to see the infield from the sloped outfield, and whose instructions for the day came at breakfast in Hebrew. This was not the right fit for these Southern athletic boys. So we hatched a plan. We got our single quarter together and escaped, walking up the road out of camp until we finally found a payphone. You remember those? The payphones. Using our quarter, "Who you gonna call?" "Aunt Mickey." "Collect." She was our Ghostbuster. She listened quietly and patiently and said, "Let me call the camp and I'll be back with you." In a few days, the camp director told us that he had talked to Mickey and we magically were allowed to leave. And what did Mickey do? She called Morris Scher. Are there any Schers here today? She called Morris Scher, who met us at the airport in New York and picked us up and flew us back down to Birmingham. Mickey picked us up at the airport, and it unfolded just like that. We didn't really think that the fact that she and Stanley were working, that she had 3 small children, that she stopped her life to make our escape a reality. By some magic, she made a call and got us into a popular camp after it had begun. When we got to Birmingham, she and Stanley and the 3 kids piled our camp trunks into a station wagon and drove us to Camp Blue Star in North Carolina. We thought we were in Nirvana. We probably were. And we were forever in her debt. End of story. Moving here at age 30, I was the young doctor of the family totem pole. When Mickey called about health advice, I always enjoyed that time alone to give her my best attention. And it gave me time to ask her advice about my life. Mickey gave her input honestly and freely. We all will live a better life if we put her words into action. I love her so much, and I'm missing her already. All your nieces and nephews love her, but Mickey, I won't tell anyone that I'm your favorite. Thank you.
I'd like to invite Mickey's son, Sam, to come up to share a few words in honor of his mother.
So I guess before I start, I have to admit that I actually thought we were going to be first. So a lot of what I was going to say has already been mentioned, and it's been sort of a long day. So I'm going to try to modify what I was going to say on the fly here. As best I can tell, the last time I was standing here on this bema, come this February, it'll be 50 years ago at my bar mitzvah. And the speech I gave at that time, I like to think I wrote it, but mostly it was ghostwritten by Mom. But this time I'm going to fly solo. Mom really would have hated today in one sense that she never really wanted to be the focus of attention. And that's sort of what today's about, but she'll get over it. And I think in part she'll get over it because I'm going to start what I want to say, my remarks, by saying a few thank yous on behalf of the family. First of all, we very much appreciate that everybody's here today and recognizing what our mom meant not only to our immediate family and to our broader family, but to sort of our community family as well. So thank you. Before I want to say a real special thank you to all the caregivers that have been in our house. For those of you who have stayed in touch with Mom and Dad or any of us over the last, 8 months, it's been sort of a progression of increasing amount of activity in the house that culminated this past weekend. But there have been a lot of caregivers that have really been phenomenal with both originally Mom and now Mom and Dad and now just Dad. But so Cheryl was great, and she's been there day in and day out and really helping to oversee the care of Mom and Dad, as has her daughter Charisse and another gentleman who we met at when Dad was in Lakeshore Marcus. And then there's been just a host of other characters, and everybody's been great. I think you've gotten a little bit of a flavor for today for some of the other people, because they've been up here speaking, that have been truly phenomenal for Mom and Dad. We've got a large family. At least when I was growing up, it was very large in Birmingham. It's a little smaller in Birmingham, but we still have a core part of our family in Birmingham. And everybody has been so great, and we're so very thankful, really, to the care and attention that y'all have helped with Mom when she was there, and Dad, too. I will call out one, and not because one is any more important than the other, but having Stuart, who spoke just a few minutes ago, in town when, because of all the medical attention that both of our parents needed, having somebody locally when Forrest couldn't be here was a real comfort to our family, and thank you, really. It's been a lot. Two other people that I want to just briefly mention, then I'll get onto my remarks that haven't already been mentioned. The first is, who also falls under the category of family, but was also sort of really special, and that's Sheriff Sokol. The assistance that you've been with Mom and Dad has really been touched and truly appreciated by our whole family, and thank you, really. The last who was also up here was Terry Hyman. Terry's mom was really, for a long time, one of my mom's best friends, and Terry grew into that role, as she mentioned. But one of the things that also really brought them together was their role in the Hever Kadisha. And I know it's become important to Terry, but that was one of these activities that was incredibly important to Mom. And Mom used to tell me, there are really only two things as a Jew that you can do that are completely selfless. And one of them is Hefer Kadisha, which she now is the beneficiary of. And the other was a part of the burial ceremony that we did this afternoon, where you helped to cover the casket. Mom had a lifetime of selflessness on behalf of other people, and today and earlier this week, she got to be the recipient, and that was very meaningful to us, and Terry's role in that was also very much appreciated. Like I said, I'm sort of doing this a little bit on the fly because a lot of what I wanted to say, I don't want to just repeat what other people had said. A lot of people who have talked, and Michael Farce will probably do some of it too, talk about a lot of Mom's activities in the community and, excuse me, and different roles. And one of the things, I mean, any organization you can think of, from the JCC to Temple to Federation, she was always active in everything. One of the things that was very interesting, I think Stuart may have alluded to, is she was almost always recruited. It was never things she sought out on her own, because she always felt somebody could do it better. In the end, she got recruited by people to play these leadership roles, and she, always did phenomenal. And it's something that she was very proud that she had the opportunity to do, but never really sought it out. Two things that I don't think people are going to talk about that were actually very important to Mom in terms of civic activities. One is she always took a lot of pride in the fact that during the winter holidays, her and Dad would go down and help feed the poor at one of the kitchens. And it was such a simple thing, and it was thankless, but it really meant a lot to her. The other, and there's sort of a funny story about this, but one of the other things she did for a long time religiously was, she didn't do it religiously, she did it every year, she was always one of the poll watchers for elections. And she took a lot of pride in just a very simple civic activity. The funny story about that is, for a number of years, Dad has tormented my Mom about the fact that he voted twice in a number of elections. And Mom is true blue Democrat, and she would just click the top of it and vote everything Democratic. Truthfully, I don't know if Dad was just tormenting her or not, but the story goes, he voted twice for Donald Trump in each election. It upset Mom tremendously, and she would swear it didn't really happen, and Dad would say, no, it really did, and she'd say, no, I was there, and he would say, well, but you went to the bathroom, and I snuck in and did it a second time. So I had in retrospect, what turned out to be a really wonderful opportunity this past week before Mom's surgery. I was in town for a couple of days. Michael Farce and I have been rotating in and out of town. And that was my turn. And usually when I was in town, I would sit and talk to Mom for hours on end about just everything. But last Thursday, a week ago Thursday, when I was in town, it just so happened that the ballots for one of the upcoming elections came, and she looked at me and sort of in a very uncharacteristic way said that she wasn't going to tell Dad about the election. And that was going to be her way to get even after all these times of Dad voting twice, I guess, for Trump. So don't tell Dad about the election. Mom can't do anything about it. For years, they've canceled each other out, and I guess that's what will happen this year. I've thought a lot about sort of Mom's legacy. Excuse me. And we actually had, on this same Thursday, we had some opportunities to talk about sort of her life, and she knew about the upcoming surgery, and we talked about that a fair amount. And she didn't say these two things exactly, but we talked about sort of how what she wanted her grandkids and I guess great-grandkids to know about her and things like that. She was sort of reminiscing. And there were two things that sort of were consistent themes, and I think you've heard a little bit about some of them. But the first was the importance of education. And education was very important to Mom. She was a voracious reader. She was always attending study groups of various sorts. She just felt like being educated, informed, and learned was a way to to be independent and not dependent, not at the mercy of other people to tell you what to do or how to do it, that you could be a self-thinker. When she read all sorts of, whether she didn't care if it was fiction or nonfiction or historical fiction. And actually recently she was telling me about a little bit of poetry that she had read, which I think was sort of new. But she read everything, and it was very important to her to be educated, which always, when she said it to me, it sort of struck me, and we got into a little bit of a discussion about it. It turns out that as educated and smart and well-informed as Mom was, she really only had 10 years of formal education. Now, my twins, who just went from 10th to 11th grade, are probably thinking, hey, this is great, I can be done now. But what it turns out is Mama was actually double promoted in elementary school twice. And so that took 2 of the years off. So that's how she got, instead of 12 years in high school, she only went to 10 years through high school. And then, as most people know, Mom dropped out of college after 1 semester, got married on her 18th birthday, which is also not okay with my kids. But and then was married to Dad for 70 years, and they had a wonderful marriage. So as I think about Mom's legacy, I really think that sort of the importance of being well-read and educated is something that was very important to her, for her children and grandchildren to all sort of buy into as part of what she wanted to pass along. The other sort of value that was really important to Mom, and I think some of this has come out also, is the importance of family. And it's interesting because, and I think Stuart was talking a little bit about Mom's childhood, but Mom's father died when she was 7, and so she was really raised by her mom, who, as I understand it, because she died the year I was born, was somewhat bohemian. So she was really raised by her older brother and her older sister, Elaine Royal and Carl Friedman. But over the course of the 70 years, what started out as just those 3 people, or 3 people plus my grandmother, sort of grew into, I think, about 16 of us Rubensteins in 4 generations. And then in Birmingham, when I was growing up, there were, I guess, 5 Royal kids and 3 Friedman kids. And then on my dad's side, all in Birmingham also, were the Apolinskis, the Sokols, and the Churners, also who had 3 kids. So Mom just loved having a large family, even though she started out with a very small family. Again, going back to the Thursday before Mom's surgery, when I was sitting and talking to her, it's comforting to me, and I hope to, I guess, my kids and my brothers, that Mom was really very much at ease with, and had come to terms with, that the surgery had some risks. And we thought that really the risk was the surgery, not sort of other things that might happen, or at least maybe Michael and I did. Forrest probably knew really what all the risks were. But it was really clear that Mom had come to terms with this, and she, pardon me, that's Mom. She told me to say thank you one more time. No, really, the way what I took away from it was, Mom felt like either she would get to be with, everything would go okay and she would get to be with us again for longer. Or if it didn't go okay, she had packed 120 years into 88 years, and she'd get to be with her brother and sister again. And that's sort of, at least the way I'm choosing to think about it, and I think that that's really how she felt. I guess in sort of summing up my remarks, I think that of all the people I know, my mom had a life well lived, and she'll live on through all of our memories for a long time. So that's all I have to say. I guess if we're going in birth order, youngest, oldest, Michael's next. If we're going favorite, I got to start, but I'm not sure who comes second. Yep.
I think Forrest, you're being nominated to go next. I think Michael lost that competition, so
Yet again.
middle children.
Right.
Rough. Sorry, middle children have rough.
Right. So Sammy, the reason that the grandkids went first, which wasn't the plan, was that some members of the family weren't here when we started this morning. So we were stalling for you guys to get here. Sammy said, I don't have to outrun the bear, I just have to outrun Forrest. Got to be prepared. It's sort of surreal being in this sanctuary. Sammy mentioned that 50 years ago or so, he was bar mitzvah here. 52 years ago, I was bar mitzvah here with Heron Levy, who was my close friend who also lives in Houston with us. We reminisce about that a lot. And the sanctuary has been redone since then, but I can look around here and I can see the faces of people that look like their parents sitting in the same seats where their parents were sitting so many years ago. We have so many great memories here. And Rabbi, we appreciate all the time you've spent with us in the last few days, taking into account Mom's situation and Dad's, and we're very, very thankful. So I had a flashback. We've all mentioned the fact that we've had very little time to actually coordinate what we're all going to say, so you're going to hear similar things, but different viewpoints from people living the same lives, basically. And Lolly can tell you this story in great detail, but we took a family trip years ago when we were little kids, and Forrest and Lolly were in the same grade, and we went up the East Coast, and they got back to school at Mountain Brook, and they each wrote reports of what they did on their summer vacation, and the teacher figured one of them must have copied off the other, not knowing that they were cousins and we were on the same trip. So some of this sort of has remnants of that. I'd made a lot of notes over the years about things I would want to say, but we really got blindsided with what happened with Mom, so there hasn't been much time to sort of coordinate us and for me to sort of spend some time with my thoughts and remarks. So I'll probably do more reading than I normally would, and a few of the people in the family didn't use their entire 10 minutes, so I'm assuming they're yielding to me for the rest of their time. So the amount of goodness in the world is greatly diminished today, but heaven's just a little bit better. If I were limited to a single sentence today, which unfortunately for you I'm not, I would capture Mom's essence by saying that she loved people, all of us, every minute of every day for 88 years. Mom wasn't a great person. No, she was something much more important than that. She was a good person, a really, really good person, the best person I ever knew. I hope it's not scandalous, Rabbi, to say this here in the sanctuary, but Mom's life consisted of a series of love affairs. And I'll touch on those along the way. Maxine Joy Friedman, what an appropriate middle name for such a joyous person, was born December 26, 1935, but her life story started many years before then. Mom's parents, Max and Sid Friedman, Daddy Max and Mimi, were born around 1900. I never knew Daddy Max. In fact, Mom didn't really either. He passed away in 1941 when she was 7 years old. And although my Mimi passed away when I was 3, I feel like I know her so well from the vivid and colorful stories that my mom and all of my older cousins have always told us. My Mimi is the one who created the family and the legacy that this Jewish community has known and been blessed by for the past 100 years. She always got such joy from helping others. She had very little, and she was known to have given away what little she had to people who had less. She passed on this legacy to her 3 children and her 11 grandchildren, a legacy of tolerance, charity, family, and living zestfully every single day. With Daddy Max having passed away so young, Mimi did the very best she could as a single parent to raise Mom as an only child. Now, I know some of you are going to yell out, what about Bubba and Elaine? Did you forget them? That couldn't happen. When Mom lost her father at age 7, Elaine and Bubba were already young adults. They effectively became surrogate parents for Mom. So Mimi, Uncle Bubba, and Aunt Elaine were totally dedicated to ensuring that Mom had everything that she needed to thrive in life: love, values, friends, and at least enough sufficient assets for the basics. And thus began love affair number 1. It's okay. One of the greatest love stories in history, Elaine, Bubba, and Mickey. Every single day, they answered the biblical question, am I my brother's keeper, with a resounding yes. Elaine and Bubba were Mom's best friends throughout their lifetime. In the early years, Elaine and Bubba took care of Mom and brought them into their respective families, including her in everything. For decades, Mom and Aunt Elaine would wake up around 5 a.m. and have a phone call and a cup of coffee to kick off the day. I didn't know they were solving the world's problems. When Mom was just in her 30s, Aunt Elaine and Uncle Bubba were already great leaders in the Birmingham Jewish community. Mom wanted to do everything with the 2 of them, so she joined them in the family business, the business of Tikkun Olam, making the world a better place. Not a very good business from the standpoint of annual income, but one that has an incredible ROI for all eternity. Aunt Elaine got sick more than 30 years ago, but she willed herself to stay alive for the next important family event, and the one after that, and one more after that. It meant so much to me that she made it to Cheryl's and my wedding in 1993 and passed away the next morning. For the next 25 years, Mom and Uncle Bubba continued their storied lives together, so proud of each other, their family, and this incredible community that they helped to build. As I mentioned a few moments ago, in the early years, Uncle Bubba provided Mom with everything she needed. Around 2016, Uncle Bubba began to decline in health, and Mom made it her life's mission to reciprocate for all that he had done for her, not out of a sense of obligation, but pure, unadulterated love. Mom visited Uncle Bubba many times a week, both to spend quality time with him and to comfort him and make sure that he had everything that he needed. Uncle Bubba passed away with Mom holding his hand on April 5th, 2018, just a day or 2 before Passover, which was his favorite holiday. He would have turned 100 years old this past May. The love affair between Elaine, Bubba, and Mom is one for the generations. I'd now like to turn back the clock to December 26, 1953, love affair number 2. Mom, Dad, and the 3 of us. Mom and Dad got married on her 18th birthday. Oh my God, how things have changed. Mom joined Dad at the University of Alabama for 1 semester and then dropped out so that she could work to support the 2 of them. So I guess that Mom was both a teen bride and a college dropout. How, oh how would she ever make anything of her life? Mom loved Dad and the 3 of us infinitely. It was her greatest joy to be with us, do for us, and mold us into a cohesive family. Mom was as good of a mother as anyone could ever be. She was always available, totally involved with everything we did, school, sports, youth activities, everything. She was totally fun, loving, encouraging, proud, and giving. Mom taught us to work hard in school, to be kind to others, to play fair, and to be humble and grateful. What's unusual is that she never told us about these values. She lived them every minute of every day, and we had the blessing of being able to learn by osmosis how to live the right way. Mom has loved her role as Dad's wife for 70 years. She's adored him, doted on him, and was delighted to be his partner in everything. The fact that they canceled each other out in the voting booth every year never got in the way. Sammy, you know Dad's actually watching this on Zoom, right? So he knows about the election now. Sorry, Dad. Dad, you gave Mom such a wonderful life. The two of you did everything together and complemented each other so very well. Everything that you've done for the past 70 years has been to make Mom's life and ours the very best it could possibly be, and you have succeeded at this brilliantly. The love you have given Mom for these many years has been a thing of beauty. The way you have cared for her so gently the past few years has been awe-inspiring. Now, it might sound like Mom was perfect. She wasn't, but she was pretty darn close. Here's a list of some of Mom's failings in life. She wasn't very good at teaching the three of us to keep our rooms tidy. Ultimately, to the detriment of our wives, she eventually surrendered and said, just keep your bedroom door closed. She never taught Dad, Forrest, nor Sammy to wake up in the morning without first bringing them coffee in bed and scratching their back for a few minutes. I never got any of that. She never learned to advocate for herself. She was the most selfless person I've ever known, always happily doing for others and never complaining about anything. Cheryl always jokes that if there were too many guests staying at the house, that Mom would simply sleep standing up in the closet. She never allowed her hair to be messy. Instead, she wrapped her hair in tissue every night and slept with a hairnet on. It's a wonder that Dad ever felt amorous enough to have 3 kids. Actually, that's not true. On Friday morning, she did allow us to mess her hair up and laugh hilariously because she was going to the beauty parlor 30 minutes later. Mom didn't love football, but she did love the people who loved Alabama football. So she drank the Roll Tide Kool-Aid and watched every Alabama game with great enthusiasm, even though I don't think she had a clue what was going on the field. Unlike most Alabama fans, Dad preferred to watch the games at home, alone with Mom, as if him concentrating on the game might impact the outcome. Well, you can't argue with his strategy, as during Dad's lifetime, he has seen Alabama win 18 national championships so far. So Mom and Dad would sit on the couch and watch the games together, that is, unless Alabama was having a poor game. That's when Dad's dedication to Mom would wane just a bit, and he would send her to the bedroom, sometimes the laundry room, to watch the game there so that he could concentrate better on the game. Mom never became a modern progressive wife. She was delighted to be Dad's partner in everything while continuing in the 1950s and 1960s role. She would make dinner, set the table, serve everyone, and then join in conversation. When Dad had finished his first glass of iced tea, he would ask Mom in a loving voice, "Mickey, could you get me some more tea?" And she would happily zip to the refrigerator to refill his glass. I can only imagine what Cheryl and Sandy and Lisa would say. Probably leaving out the profanities, something like, "Yeah, right. Get your own tea." So speaking of profanities, there's been a brief comment about this. Most people who know Mom would swear that she never cursed, not ever, no matter what. That's not true. She did curse, but only once. I'll take it a little further than you did, Stuart. Gary Stein has been like a fourth son to Mom, Tracy's husband. He adored her, respected her, and loved kibitzing with her. Once, some years ago, he went to Birmingham and went to visit Mom and Dad. And somehow his mission became finding a way to get Mom to say a really bad word. He asked Mom, "Hey, Mickey, would you say a really bad word?" And she said, "Absolutely not." Gary, in his persuasive way, continued, "Come on, Aunt Mickey. I love you so much. It would mean so much to me if you would curse just once." Mom finally capitulated, I asked you about this before, and said, "Crap." And Gary replied, No, Aunt Mickey. I meant a really nasty word, like the F word." Mom always wanted to please Gary, so she thought for a moment, grimaced a bit, and then said, "Gary, I love you so effing much." Love affair number 3, grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Mom's legal name was Maxine Joy Friedman Rubenstein, but she went by a number of other nicknames of endearment: Honey, Sweetie, Mom, Mick, Mickey, Aunt Mickey, and her favorite of all, Mimi. Melinda, Leah, Daniel, Max, Emily, and Simon. Oh yeah, Sydney. And Hudson and Sloan. Anna. You were awesome. You guys are Mom's greatest treasures, her connection to the future. She loves each of you so very much and enjoyed spending time with you every chance she got. Your job is to think of Mimi regularly, to be inspired by her life and her values, and to tell your children all of the vivid and colorful stories about her so that they will know your Mimi like we know our Mimi. By doing this, you'll keep her alive for another 100 years. Love affair number 4, extended family. We're getting toward the end. Extended family and friends. Mom loved our wives every bit as much as she loved the 3 of us, often more. And they weren't her daughters-in-law, they were her daughters. Similarly, she passionately loved her nieces and nephews, all 17 of them, the Sokals, Cherners, Apolinskis, Royals, and Friedmans. She had her own close relationship with her nieces and nephews, not just as a group, but every single one of you individually. I'd like to ask the nieces and nephews that are here to stand up for just 1 second, if you would. A lot of these faces will look familiar. So the 17 of you and those that are watching remotely are the only people who can legally call Mom Aunt Mickey. But you weren't the only people who did so. Y'all can sit down now. So many people of my generation loved Mom so much that I think there were literally hundreds of people that referred to her as Aunt Mickey. If you or any of your children or grandchildren referred to my mom as Aunt Mickey, would you raise your hand? I rest my case. Mom not only loved her family, but all people she ever met. The delivery man, the stranger sitting next to her on a plane, the child in a park. By the end of a wedding weekend, this would happen often, she would be introducing you to your cousin you had never met at the table number 17. And let's not forget Jack and Jackie, the 2 best friends a 2-legged creature could ever have. Last love affair, number 5, Judaism and the Birmingham Jewish community. Mom loved Judaism. She grew up down the street at Temple Emmanuel, but she joined Dad at Bethel after they were married. We grew up having Shabbat dinner every week. Mom regularly attended Shabbos services on Saturday morning and actually enjoyed doing it. We celebrated all the Jewish holidays with our extended family. Mom loved studying Torah at Temple with so many different rabbis through the decades. In her 50s, she finally had her own bat mitzvah, and she was really, really proud of this milestone. One of the greatest mitzvot in Judaism is to help prepare a deceased person's body for burial with ritual love and respect. This mitzvah is so special as it's perhaps the only act of loving kindness that the recipient can never thank you for which the recipient can never thank you, Lolly. Mom has been totally devoted to her service with the Chevra Kadisha for 30 or 40 years. She has performed this selfless service for hundreds of other people over the years, both total strangers and her very best friends. She's done this when she was young, which seems out of ordinary, but also when she was frail in more recent years. It's always a matter of being focused out on the person in need. Terry Hyman, thank you so much for being Mom's partner in this wonderful mitzvah throughout the years. You have been Mom's soulmate, just like your mom. As I've mentioned a number of times, we've been blessed with such a close-knit family, and all of you have provided so much support during the last 2 years with Mom's illness progressing and the last 2 months since Dad's fall. But there are a number of family members, most of whom live here in town, that have gone way beyond the call of duty. First of all, Cheryl and Sharice, who have been taking care of Mom and Dad. I want to thank you so much for providing Mom and Dad with such loving care as you did for Uncle Bubba 6 or 8 years ago. Shara, you've been like the sister we never had. Your love and energy are boundless. Joycia and Arthur, Steve and Lana, we can't sufficiently thank the 4 of you for spending so much time with Mom and Dad. You really brightened up their lives. Mark, you're one of the most loving and caring people I've ever known. You've cared for Mom and Dad like you did for Bubba and Gladys. For the past 5 or 6 years, almost every single week, you've gotten together with them for Shabbat dinner. It was the highlight of their week. Stuart and Barbara, you guys have come to the rescue dozens of times, large issues and small. We simply couldn't have made it without your love and help. Lisa, we're so appreciative for the wise and compassionate medical advice that you've provided throughout all of this, along with Forrest and Stuart. Sweet Aaliyah, you're the only grandchild here in Birmingham, and you've taken on much more responsibility than a grandchild ever should. You have reciprocated beautifully for Mom and Dad, like you did for Uncle Papa. Forrest, you are simply amazing. I always knew it, but the last year or so, it's just been remarkable. We simply couldn't have made it through all of this without you taking the lead on everything medical. You're an awesome doctor and an even better son and brother. Mom, you've worked so tirelessly for others for more than 60 years. Now it's time for you to rest. Please give a firm hug tonight to Mimi, Uncle Bubba, and Elaine, and sweet Robin. What a life so very well lived. Mom, we miss you so deeply already, and we will remember you and be rich by you forever.
Now I'd like to invite Forrest to come up to share in memory of his mother.
Actually, my memory's not quite as good as everyone else's, so I just wanted to take a minute and look at each of you so I can remember this when I look back on this moment. My hands are empty. My brothers, both being lawyers, are very eloquent. They have meticulously written notes, and so in that spirit, I also wrote beautiful notes. It was epic. The prose, it rivaled the Iliad. It was poetry, but being a physician, I couldn't read my own handwriting. So. To borrow a line from Mom's favorite movie, excuse me while I whip this out. I want to be able to remember this moment, so not being able to rely on my memory as I once did, I want to memorialize this so I can go back. Now everybody smile. because this is, in fact, not a time for grieving or crying. This is a time for celebrating a life well lived, and I can't think of a better example of it. And that is the best way to cherish her memory and to send her off to greater things, is to smile and to laugh and to love. My brothers have done an excellent job of reciting the history, so I'm not going to dwell on that very much, at least not the ancient stuff. I've been very fortunate over the last year or so as Mom and Dad's health has dwindled, and we've spent more time coming to Birmingham to spend long periods of time sitting and talking with each of them, holding their hand, hugging them, and just talking about their lives and the things that are important to them and the things that they want us to remember and take away from all of this. And both Michael and Sammy have done an excellent job of thanking people, and I reiterate all of those, but there were some glaring errors in their list. The first is my father, Stanley. He has stepped up to an incredible degree since last December when Mom first started dwindling and developing more problems. He not only was her husband and the provider for the household and the walker of Jackie and the grocery shopper, but he also became her nighttime caregiver. And for 16 hours each day, he took care of her every need and didn't ask anything in return. And Mom appreciated it, and she told him, and it just sort of bounced off of him. He just felt like that's what you do for someone that you've lived with for 70 years, and he did. They also somehow glaringly left out Michael and Sammy, who have made this not so pleasant journey more tolerable. They have handled all of the legal, insurance, paperwork things that I have absolutely no skill at whatsoever. And they've allowed me to focus on the things that I can do and do well, and I couldn't have done it without them. And of course, all of you who they already thanked, but I'll once again do that, showing them the compassion and the love and the caring, and basically reflecting back what they said and felt and did for each of you over the last 80 years. I don't really have a whole lot of funny anecdotes or anything like that for them, but I do want to take this moment now to actually read something that my son Daniel sent, because he couldn't be here today. He's on some remote island in Sweden or Norway or somewhere, I don't know exactly where. Anyway, this is what he wanted me to say for him. As I tried to think of remarks for Mimi, I reached as far back as possible, all the way back where she would sternly tell me to stop climbing on her banister, which, by the way, he made her do less than a month after she had a hip replacement, and she actually climbed up the outside of the banister because Daniel asked her to. To her flying 1,000 miles to come see me at Grandparents' Day, to her and I just sitting in the kitchen of our room in Destin, just talking about life. I realized that nothing I experienced was super unique. Everything she did for me, how she put her entire being into being there for me, she did for everyone she knew. She built an entire community with her actions. While I have nothing unique to share, I take solace that she was able to help shape me like she has helped to shape the lives of so many others. If you're watching, Daniel, thank you. I reflect on the past 67 years that I've known Mom and her remarkable journey and transition. As Michael mentioned, she still was a creature shaped by the Depression that she never actually lived through, but also the 50s and 60s, which were her life, and the way she approached it, and the way in more recent years she became a modern liberal woman filled with paradoxes and dichotomies. This is someone who, as was mentioned, made sure that dinner was on the table every night and at the assigned time when Dad got home from work. And she did all of the motherly things, including at one point having 57 separate carpools. She made sure that Michael had potato chips and ketchup for every single meal, and most of Sammy's meals were spaghetti and meatballs, but she made separate meals for everyone because my father also did not have a very discriminating palate, and there were less than about 5 or 6 things that he would actually eat for dinner. Fortunately, I was the only normal one in the household, but but despite that, and despite the fact that to this day she still signs her name Mrs. Stanley Rubenstein, she is, underneath it all, a modern, liberated woman who took great pride in, on one of her many trips to Israel, being called to the Torah, something which was never allowed in this synagogue when she was growing up, to truly being a liberal woman at heart. As Michael mentioned, she typically canceled my father's votes, but that was okay. They came to terms with it. And as Michael mentioned, she was an avid reader. She loved all types of genres of books and literature. She even liked historical fiction, which made it easy for her to sit at home at night and watch Fox News with my father. She was very accepting of people. I think a trait that she got from her mother, our Mimi, who was, as was mentioned, a bohemian woman. She had friends who were gay, who were African, who she associated with all of the things that people in the 50s and 60s in Birmingham did not do. And she carried that forward even to recent years when on the Hever Kadesha, there were very sensitive issues that came up, first in the 80s and 90s with people being afraid to deal with people who had HIV virus, and she bravely, even though she didn't understand it or what the potential risks were, insisted that they be cared for the exact same way. And more recently, when there were challenges involving the Hever Kadesha about who takes care of a transgender person. Do the men do it? Do the women do it? And her answer was, it doesn't matter, let's just get it done. And that's the way she approached every problem in life, was as an individual, what can I do to help that person? And I think it was a great role model for us. I know that I will never actually be able to live up to that ideal, but there's nothing wrong with having something to strive for. This was our religious home growing up. As was mentioned, it's changed many times. I remember in 1970 standing up here for the first time with the squeaky, shaky voice that Mom had to actually bring me a glass of water so I could get through my Haftorah. But things have changed, and I don't need a glass of water today, but I will need something to wipe my eyes with at some point tonight. Anyway, I do want to thank each and every one of you, not only for being here today, but for everything that you've done for our family, and most especially for my parents, because they felt a deep personal interaction with each of you. And if Mom were here, she would actually go around and give each of you a hug and tell you some amusing anecdote that she remembered. I don't remember all that stuff, but I do want to thank you, and it's all yours, Rabbi.
Many of you who have heard me at these memorial services and funerals have heard me say, one of the harder parts of being a rabbi is having to follow up the families, in part because they tell all the stories that you were going to tell, but also it's hard to top their emotion. But I'll add one more tale to the list. Not of Aunt Mickey necessarily, but a rabbinic tale that some of you have heard me tell before, and I'll paraphrase it a tiny bit. There's a story in which Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, then the leader of the Jewish community during and after the fall of Jerusalem to the Romans, was walking with his student, Rabbi Yoshua, in Jerusalem. As they passed by the ruins of the temple, Rabbi Yoshua broke down. "What are we supposed to do now?" he asked his teacher. "How are we supposed to continue when the temple, the center of our religious lives, the place we communicated with God through sacrifice, lies destroyed?" "Don't worry, my child," Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai gently responded. "We have a better way of communicating with God instead of sacrifice. We have Gemilut Chasadim, acts of loving kindness." I think of this text often. In a time when their world had fallen apart, when they didn't know what to do, when all hope seemed lost for the Jewish future, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's response was simple. Begin rebuilding by treating people with kindness. Once you start with that, everything else will take care of itself and will fall into place. If there was anyone who exemplified this teaching, it was Mickey, whose life we gather together today to honor. There's no dimension in Mickey's life where her kindness didn't extend and wasn't felt by everyone around her. But as you've heard this afternoon, her family always felt it most. She would work at Stanley's office, even if it was just to make sure her beloved husband of 70 years had his lunch and his tea every day. And then, as Forrest just mentioned, would come home to drive an estimated 57 carpools a week to get her children or her grandchildren where they needed to go. Mickey was at almost every birthday party, every grandparents' day, every major school event, every special occasion for her family, and would sit and talk to them about what they were interested in and what they were doing, even if it was things like Alabama football or social media, which she didn't entirely understand. But as all of us in this room know, family was a loose term for Mickey. Once you were in her family, you never left. She was a second parent to her son's friends growing up, and as they told me, fights would break out before BBYO conventions about who would get to stay at her house. She always had food in the back seat of her car to deliver to someone, whether it was because they needed it or it was just their favorite. And as you've heard, as her best friends and her role models, Her sister Elaine and her brother Bubba, Zichronam Livracha, passed away. She continued to invite their partners over for meals as if they were still family, because they were. She didn't like the term in-law and referred to her son's wives as her daughters. And I joke that until this past couple days, I was never entirely sure who was actually related to her, because everyone would call her Aunt Mickey, and everyone was part of her extended family. And then there were the strangers. Although there was really no such thing as a stranger to Mickey, she worked tirelessly throughout her life for those she never met or who couldn't reciprocate her help. She was critical in our community's efforts to resettle Soviet Jews in Birmingham, sometimes personally taking them to the grocery store when they arrived here to help them through the culture shock and understand what they were looking at. She was one of the leading forces behind the Levitt Jewish Community Center starting programming for seniors, doing so when she was in her 30s and 40s and not yet needing it for herself. She helped get the N.E. Miles Jewish Day School off the ground, was important to the Birmingham Jewish Federation and Foundation, has always been integral to Temple Bethel, its sisterhood and its foundation, and countless other Birmingham organizations. And as you've heard, one of the dearest to her heart was the Chevra Kadisha. As she helped prepare for burial, they said hundreds. I'm going to estimate it was probably at least 1,000 people over her time as in charge of the Chevra Kadisha. A mitzvah that, according to the rabbis, is one of the greatest acts of kindness a person can do. I could go on. With Mickey, it's not hard to. I didn't talk about her sense of humor, her humility, or her rare ability to make every person she talked to feel like they were the most important person in the world at that moment. And I'm sure there are dozens of accomplishments I'm leaving out and stories I haven't shared. If I were to do so, we might never leave. Instead, I'll leave it with the words her daughter, married to her son, said, "You can't out-nice Mickey," which kind of says it all. And for us, we face a difficult world. All of us in this room face a world where anti-Semitism, hatred, and political polarization are at levels I haven't seen in my lifetime. There's a difficult world to rebuild, much as it was for Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehoshua. But what those rabbis and what Aunt Mickey teach us is we have to start somewhere. And so we start with Gemilut Chasadim. We start with acts of kindness. And when we're unsure of what to do, we ask ourselves, what would Mickey do? And as we say Zichrona Livracha, as much as Mickey blessed each of us in her lifetime, we pray that her memory continues to be a blessing to all who knew her. And may that memory inspire us, each, to both do the right thing and the kind thing, as Mickey always did. This time I'd like to invite the family to rise, as I will continue with the El Mali Rachamim, the memorial prayer, followed by the mourner's Kaddish. El Mali Rachamim, שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים. את נשמת מלכה גילה בת משה מרדכי שהלכה לעולמה, בגן עדן תהא מנוחתה. Ana ba'ar harachamim, hastirea beseter knafecha lolami, utzror bitzror achaim et nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata, v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Mickey Rubenstein, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life, and may she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. We'll continue together with the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divrach hiruteh v'yamlich malchuteh, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala u'vizman kariv v'yimru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'la'olmei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shmei dekudsha b'reyechu. Le'ila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, da'amiran be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei shlama Rabba min Shemaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. That concludes our service for today. I'm going to invite everybody to move to the Filler Cultural Center, which is straight down that way for Shiva, for a meal of consolation and for Shiva. We will be doing mincha services at 5:30 as well in the chapel. Before the family heads out, if I can invite all the guests to form two lines leading into the Cultural Center, and as the family will pass through to offer them words of consolation, including Hamakom Yinachem Erchem V'toch Sha'ar Avelei Tzion V'Yerushalayim. May God comfort you.